From KapKV Local News, this is 100% Chance of Wine with Jason Valentine.
This week we head somewhere between out of this world and downtown Walla Walla. We're visiting with Lane and Drew Pock, owners of Moonbase Cellars, a relatively new brand piquing interest around the region. Let's start in the beginning. You both got married in 2013.
Yep, to each other.
To each other,
Right.
yes, absolutely. And you were lifelong Missourians. Is it Missourians?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
That works.
And then you found yourself in southeastern Washington 4 years later.
Yeah.
Was that the plan?
That was not the plan. No, that was not the plan. But yeah, it was not the plan. My wife and I, we just kind of got into wine, I guess, after getting married, and we took wine trips. And then one year we took a trip up here to Walla Walla in southeastern Washington, and we liked the town, we liked the area. And then when we went back, that was kind of when we started like brainstorming, like, oh, that'd be cool, you know, to have a winery one day. And then we're like, well, let's just do it when we retire. And then we're like, well, that's never going to happen. You know, let's just, if we're going to do it, let's just try to do it now.
So they did. Drew went to school to learn about wine, and Lane continued her pharmaceutical career to keep them going.
Food, all that kind of stuff.
Food kind of necessary.
Yeah,
good.
you need that. Yeah, food, how, you know, all that kind of stuff. That would have not been possible either without Lane and her profession.
So perfect partnership.
Yeah.
Correct. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
And I got to have some fun on the weekends with wine, but then he had to do all like the hard work. Because I always tell people, they're like, "Oh, you have a winery." I'm like, "It's wonderful. It's like 90% very hard work, like physical labor."
Yes.
So that's Drew's 90%, and then I get to help with the other 10. Yeah.
Right. Perfect.
Yeah. Perfect couple.
Yeah.
I would say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the fun labels for their wines are designed with their home state in mind.
And then like kind of the fun part that I can kind of show you on the labels,
Yeah.
because he's from St. Louis, he helped to tie us in. So like this is sort of like the St. Louis Arch. And then there's
beautiful.
also like the St. Louis flag on the back of each of our labels. Our LGM label, which has a little alien on the moon, is holding the St. Louis flag as well.
So your first vintage, when you popped it open, how did that feel when you took in the aroma of your first vintage?
Yeah, it's kind of like, oh my God, I can't believe we did this, you know? Even great scores. I mean, we got a lot of good scores and things.
Good
You're like, oh my,
feedback.
good
Yeah.
feedback. And it's just like, oh my goodness, I just didn't know that you could do it, I guess. I don't know.
You were so nervous going in. I just
Yeah.
remember up until like bottling, and our first bottling, it was a fiasco because it was like in the middle of a huge snowstorm.
Oh.
But we had devoted friends, we had family come in from Seattle, we had, you know, a great group of people to help us do the bottling, and I just remember it being so emotional to
Yeah.
have like our first bottle and just be
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, I can't
Yeah.
believe this happened in the middle of snowpocalypse too. It's
Yeah.
just insane.
Yeah,
And
six years worth of work,
Yeah,
if you will,
yeah.
of planning, and there it is, yeah.
And then you're off and running.
Yeah,
And then you're off
exactly.
and running, yeah.
And Moonbase Cellars has continued to run with a beautiful tasting room in downtown Walla Walla and using a vast variety of grapes to give their wine its unique flavor. I asked Drew what would be one of his biggest goals for the winery, and obviously he's a big fan of Elon Musk.
One plan is to, hey, let's get some wine to Elon. I think that'd be kind of cool. And maybe
Get it to the moon.
get it to the moon, you know. I think that would be
It's a
pretty
natural.
cool.
Yeah.
You know, people are like, oh, we should grow grapes up there. I'm like, that'd be tricky. You know, I think we grow grapes here, we make wine here, we got it kind of figured out, and then we just bring it to the moon. I think that's the answer. And yeah, if our bottle happens to be the first bottle on the moon, that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah. That would be a good legacy. You're right.
Yeah.
All right, well,
You got to watch your swirls on the moon, right? Less gravity, so if you're swirling, you just got to be careful on the moon.
it might just
It's
go
gonna-
straight up.
It's going to go everywhere.
All right, well, to the first wine on the moon.
hey, there we go.
So head down to downtown Walla Walla and enjoy their out-of-this-world wine at Moonbase Cellars. We head to wine headquarters in Walla Walla, just near the airport, and inside this pink tasting room is a relatively new and award-winning winery that has an unlikely backstory. Partners Jay Kurtulis and Matt Riley were heading in different directions professionally, but ultimately answered to the siren call of making wine in Walla Walla. I love your story. We have an architect and we have a corporate lawyer. We'll start with Jay. What was your road to coming to Walla Walla?
Yeah, it was a long and varied path to get to where I am now. It started as a biology major in undergrad. Thought I was going to be a research scientist. realized I didn't want to be a research scientist, and off I went to law school. And eventually my legal career brought me to Washington State, to Seattle, to work at Amazon in the legal department, and discovered Washington wines and the wonder of Washington wines. And after I had left my Amazon gig and had a little more time, I started spending a little bit of time in Woodinville with some of the winemakers I had gotten to know, and really appealed to me. And instead of making stacks of paper, here was this something I could make that, one, I knew I loved to drink, two, tied into all the previous career paths I'd been on. All makes sense now in retrospect.
Absolutely. All right, so Matt, architecture, right?
Yeah.
And it led you to wine. Tell me your story.
Yeah, so, graduated from University of Kentucky with an architecture degree. So moved to Spokane and got an architecture job, and lo and behold, quickly gained exposure to the Washington wine industry and all things Washington wine. I guess you could say I come by it honestly. Wine was a very constant and important thing in my household growing up as a kid. My parents are some of the biggest wine lovers I know. So for me to then dive into the Washington, wine industry, wine scene, it was a logical step.
Now you're both pretty really fine-tuned disciplines, lawyer, architect. Is making wine a fine-tuned discipline?
I think it certainly can be, and I think a lot of our success is attributable to a certain amount of attention to detail. I think we came into it really eyes open and really focused on what it was going to take, and have executed on that plan pretty well.
Jay and Matt have been making award-winning wines for a relatively short amount of time, and they have an old-school approach to making it. Jay, you guys mentioned that you want to roll back wines and not kind of get caught up in the current trends. Are you just trying to stay true to wine, or what is behind that philosophy?
I think one of the great things about wine is that there's not a lot of right and wrong. Kind of did more research and learning, and I'd kind of started to understand that I think there's a pendulum to a certain extent, and the stylistic perspective for a while was way out there in American wine, way out there on that ripe, big, bold, over the top side. I think that pendulum's coming back, which is great. We're maybe slightly ahead of it, a little less oak, a little less alcohol. What we're preferring to express is that more restrained, a little more balanced, a little more, it's just different. The fruit is a hero in a different way. Yeah.
I like that. Matt, Prospice Wines, the name, where does the name come from?
The three-part phrase, respice, ad spice, prospice, which is learn from the past, live in the present, and look to the future. And so for us, we took the name Prospice, Prospice, and Americanized it to Prospice. And for us, it's that forward-looking aspect of wine and winemaking.
Jay, Prospice, looking towards the future with optimism. Let's look into the future for Prospice Wines. Where do you guys want things to go?
Yeah, well, it's an exciting time to be talking to you, because as of October 1st, we took over a new building a couple blocks south of here. We're going from what we have in the back here is 1,200 square feet of production space. The new building is 5,300 square feet of production space. The one thing we want to do is grow it sustainably and grow it in a way where we never lose touch with the artisanal nature of what we got into it for.
It's all about just building memories, and so we want to share wine that's enjoyable and helps build those memories and those experiences as well.
We are in Zilla's wine country at Sheridan Vineyard's relatively new tasting room. We're sitting down with owner and winemaker Scott Greer, who didn't expect to have a career in wine. In the midst of a successful finance career, on a night of celebration with his wife, he had his first taste of good wine, and it changed the course of his life.
And that first sip of the wine hooked me.
Really?
I had no interest in wine. I was a Scotch guy at the time. Okay, so, So I built a wine cellar and in-house, and within about 6 months, I'd gone from owning 0 bottles to owning about 1,400 bottles.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And then I started looking at how much money I was spending on wine and thought I could make it cheaper than I can buy it.
And then you found a place that was How did it pique your interest? It was a bit in disarray. What made it the right choice?
Impulse buy. I kid you not, because I looked everywhere. I looked Napa, Oregon, Sonoma. And so I got a call from a real estate agent talking about, there's a unique piece of property in Eastern Washington. I should come and take a look at it. And it was in November, and there was about 2 inches of snow on the ground. He takes me up there. He's explaining to me that don't judge a book by its cover type of thing. But it was the second I got out of the car, I knew I wanted to own that property. I don't know how, I don't know why.
That drink of wine on that perfect night.
Screwed me.
Stepping on this property, is it kismet, Scott? Is it fate? What do you think?
I have no idea. That I don't own it. It probably owns me more than I own it.
Sure.
And because it's the vineyard and the winery are very demanding mistress. They demand a lot of your time and attention, but I love it. I can't believe I used to sit in an office all damn day and look at charts and allocations and so what a boring life that ended up being.
Sure.
And in comparison to what I live now. So this is my happy place.
We're talking with owner and winemaker Scott Greer, and I asked him, why is it important to have sustainable farming methods for his vineyard?
What's taking care of the land, being a good steward of the land, because the land gives me so much to be grateful for in my life. I owe it to take care of it, because it takes care of me. When I don't do my job, she gets mad at me, and she punishes me for it. So all I know is that right now, I live 90% of my life on a four-wheeler riding through a vineyard that I adore, covered in dust. I look nasty. I smell nasty, I'm sure. I smell like the dirt that I love. But I wouldn't do it any other way right now. And it's my happy place.
One reviewer said, Sheridan wines are big. And B-I-G were capitalized.
Oh, really?
As in the flavor.
Okay.
Would you agree with that assessment?
Yes.
Why is that?
Because that's what the vineyard gives me. My wines, I would say, are a combination of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sophia Loren. You want that power, but you also need that elegance and that beauty and that balance.
Sure.
But if you have wines that are huge and tannic, they're not very pleasurable. But if you have wines that are big and voluptuous and have a mouthfeel that just is, wants you to have another sip. That's what we're trying to do here.
Sheridan Vineyards, Sheridan Wine. You've talked a lot about legacy. What do you want ultimately the legacy of Sheridan to be?
Place matters, and that place is very special. That my impulse buy was not a screw up. It was a good decision, not a bad decision, because I can guarantee you that night when I was driving home at about 10 o'clock at night. And driving through the pass in the snow, I had oh my God, what have I just done to myself?
Buyer's remorse.
Yes. And when I got home, my wife said, nope, I'm not gonna live with some guy who regrets not doing this. You're doing it. And I said, yes, dear.
And here we are 25 years later.
Yes.
Outside Sleight of Hand Cellars looks like most wineries, some vineyards and a tasting room, but once you get inside, you're not sure if you accidentally walked into a vintage record store. You find that their, magic trick is offering wine paired with rock and roll.
When presenting the wines in a tasting room environment, we just wanted to take away some of the stuffiness.
That's co-owner and winemaker Trey Bush. You can find over 3,000 records here, and there's even a turntable to play your favorites.
People were drawn to the vinyl collection
Sure.
and the turntable before they even started talking about the wine. And I love talking to people about music.
Sure.
And so all of a sudden they're very comfortable. And they're like, oh, you've got a Tom Petty album. And let's play some Tom Petty. Now they've sort of set their own environment. It's just a fun way to interact with the consumer as well as have a place to store our vinyl here.
Even their name came from a song from iconic Seattle band Pearl Jam.
Sleight of Hand's always been one of my favorite songs, and the story in the song talks about a guy who sort of walks the same path every day, and one day instead of taking a right, he takes a left. And that's a little bit how I got in the wine business 21 years ago.
So the music might get them in, but the wine keeps them coming back. For their wines, they have 3 different vineyards supplying their own special taste for each wine.
We've got 8 acres here in Walla Walla, 5 acres on Red Mountain, and 5 acres on the Horse Seven Hills. And so using those 3 vineyard sites, we can craft more complex wines rather than relying on one site.
Sure.
You know, Walla Walla Cabernet tastes different from Red Mountain Cabernet, and it tastes different from Horse Seven Hills. So you have those different flavors and aromas from each of those sites, and we can build a more complex wine that way.
So you're almost taking the best of our areas growing into your wines.
Yes, yes. We make Washington State wine.
Another thing Sleight of Hand Cellars has in common with some rock stars is giving back. There is a symbiotic relationship with wineries and restaurants.
It's, it's a huge part of our we have a direct-to-consumer business out of our tasting room and our wine club, and we do some retail. But, the restaurants are where a lot of customers will discover us for the first time.
During the height of the pandemic, they decided to help.
We work with a specific vineyard in the Yakima Valley called Lewis. I've worked with that vineyard for 21 years now, and we have 4 acres of Lewis. And of the 4 acres, most of that goes into levitation, but we only make so many cases of that reserve Syrah, and so we end up having some Syrah left over, and we normally put that into our red table wine program. We pulled that Syrah side, and I think it was about 300 cases, and we bottled it under what's called a restaurant relief wine. And the original idea was to actually give it to the restaurants.
But it's not legal.
But it's not legal. And so we found that out after about 2 days, and sold to for $40 a case. And that way they could, if they were doing glass pours outside, they'd be making their money back on, 1 bottle of wine. And the rest of it, they could then take that money and throw it back into the restaurant, throw it back to their employees, whatever they needed it for.
So not only is Sleight of Hand Cellars a fun place to visit, they're also active in helping out the community. Lastly, I asked Trey to sum up what is the Sleight of Hand Cellars experience.
We make serious wine with a serious attitude, and we certainly hope they enjoy the wines that they experience. And we want them to go home and talk about what a fun tasting room that we have. Just spread the Sleight of Hand love.
We are in downtown Walla Walla, and from the outside, this looks like many other wineries. But when you go inside, things get a little different. You may think you've stepped into a movie memorabilia shop, but it is home to a relatively new winery, Time and Direction. I sat down with owner and self-proclaimed director of awesome for the shop. His road to Walla Walla was a long one, starting in New York City.
Go to New York, and first day on the job, they're like, oh, they're doing a wine tasting in the back. I was like, oh, great. But then I really started to get into it, and so I decided I needed more stable income than tips, waiting tables, so I went into restaurant management.
He eventually showed great passion for wine and got into the sommelier program and ended up going on a wine tasting trip to Washington that included Walla Walla wine.
So then I went back to New York and started buying up all the wines that I discovered while I was out here, and had a tasting with Ron Coleman, who was the former owner of Tamarack Cellars here in town, and he told me about the Walla Walla Community College winemaking program, and so that got the wheels turning even more. And
now flash forward a couple years, and Steve got the opportunity he was looking for.
I worked for Aaron Morrell for 4 years in his cellar and his production team, and after I went to the community college winemaking program simultaneously while working for Aaron full time. And so when I graduated, he had came up to me and said, I've been thinking about starting an employee benefit program where you guys can make up to 1,000 cases of wine in the facility free of charge. And so I was like, all right, this is why I moved out here. Let's make a go of this. And so we used the last of our savings to buy the first batch of grapes.
Wow. So the dream is starting to materialize.
Yeah.
So was there a point where you felt, oops, I may have made a mistake, or did it just feel right the whole way?
It just kind of felt right the whole way. There's some days where I'll come in here, I was like, I have my own place. Like, I have my own tasting room. I'm my own boss. I want to say that that's everybody's dream, to someday be able to do that, but
sure.
I will be like, I can't believe that this is actually happening.
You said that you design your own even labels, correct?
Yep.
So tell me about a couple of the labels of your current wines.
I've designed all of my labels based on my life and things that are important to me. One of my white wine is called Fretboard. It's 100% Viognier. Has a picture of one of my guitars on the label. The Reserve from 2018 is dedicated to my parents. It's called Wellspring, which means the source, and it has my last name in the word, Wells. But there's a family tree on the label that with my parents' initials down at the base, sort of like the roots that helped me grow into the person that I am today. And then I actually got to release that wine last year on September 19th, which was their 50th anniversary. The name of my rosé is Up, Up, Down, Down, Left, Right, BA, Select, Start. That is a cheat code to a Nintendo game that I used to play when I was a kid. So that wine is all about my nerdy side, about comic books and video games and sci-fi and fantasy.
And Steve likes to have a little bit of fun with his back labels as well.
I want to make wine accessible to as many people as possible. So one of the back labels of my wine is some tasting notes I turned into Mad Libs. Because one, I hate writing tasting notes, but also it's me making fun of the wine business being too snooty. So we should all just relax and have a little bit more fun with it.
Time and direction, it's almost up to one person's perception of time and direction. So it's not something specific.
Yes.
It's kind of more ethereal.
Yes, well, so it kind of also symbolizes my journey from New York City all the way out here to learn how to make wine. And then a little bit deeper meaning is like any journey you go on in life, that's all you need is some time and a direction.
Sure, and any journey they go with your wine.
Yeah, exactly.
You can find Steve at his tasting room, Time and Direction, on North Spokane Street in downtown Walla Walla. Thanks to Steve for his time, and I guess direction as well. We head over to our friends at Tagaris Winery and talk to an old friend of mine, their head chef, Josh Duquest. Back when I was host on Good Morning Northwest, Josh was one of my favorite guests on the show. He's as lively as his cooking is great.
Is that what they teach you in Chef 101?
That's all I learned for 2 years.
Josh is a true Tri-City success story. He first learned cooking at Tri-Tech, and after perfecting his craft for a number of years, found himself at Tagaris Winery for the last 13 years and counting. He plans to stay in the Tri-Cities region for family, love of the area, and a local resource you can't get anywhere else.
And one of the things I know that you like about the Tri-Cities is the fresh produce. That's kind of a hallmark of what you can get here
Definitely,
at Tagaris. Tell me why it's so important to get fresh produce.
Just the nutritional value is amazing, and we're supporting local first and foremost. My parents own an irrigation store as well, so I've always been a part of the farming community.
I love the Ghostbusters shirt you wear to the farmer's market.
That's how you know me. Pick me out of the crowd with the Ghostbusters.
So cooking for wine, Josh, is there a certain style you have to do that makes it pair so well with Tagaris wine?
Each wine is completely different from another one. And when you're trying the wines, I work very close with the winemaker, for the flavors that he wants to see in his wine. You look for the subtle flavors that people pick out when they're smelling the wine, and basically you take it and you complement your food around that.
Zagat says that Tagaris is one of 8 wineries in the world with fabulous food. What does that mean to you to hear that from somebody, a group as prestigious as Zagat?
It's pretty awesome. Don't tell the chef, though. He's got a big ego.
Oh, I won't.
No, it's great. It's a badge that we wear proudly.
And finally, I wondered what impression he wants to leave people with after visiting his dining room.
I hope they're left with, this is just a piece of, the Mediterranean that you can't get anywhere else in the Tri-Cities. It's an escape. Come back to escape.
So if you can't afford a trip to the Mediterranean,
no, it's
come
right
to
here.
Tagaris.